everyone, I'm Jen and I'm so glad you're here. Today, let's geek out about my 2024 book bracket. Book brackets are pretty common for a lot of people to set up if they keep some kind of a reading journal. It picks the best book from each month and pits them against each other to find your favorite book of the year. Or at least that's the theory. My problem with the book bracket is, as you may have seen if you watched my video about my Hall of Fame for 2024, is that some of the books in here that won for particular months are the best thing I read that month, but they're not necessarily the best things I read all year. Anyway, I digress. And so it pits those books against each other to have some finalists or semifinalists. I guess actually those would be semifinalists. And then the best thing that you read each year as you go across in a bracket, sports style of picking the way that things go. If you want to see me choose the best books of each month and agonize over my choices, go check out my video on my 2024 Hall of Fame. I've started here by putting in the books that won for each of those months. So in January, we've got The Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. February was Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. March was East of Eden by John Steinbeck, which I just realized I pasted in upside down and I'm not fixing it. April is Dungeon Crawler Carl, kind of standing in for the whole series, but mostly trying to think about it as just that particular book. May is How to Solve Your Own Murder. June was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Very much enjoyed that. July, The World We Make, which is the second book in a duology. The first one in that lost to Legends and Lattes in June. So this is, again, I'm trying to consider this as just the second book, but also it's hard to consider it on entirely its own. In August, we've got Homecoming by Kate Morton. In September, we have The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. October is The Weaver and the Witch Queen by Genevieve Gornichek. And November is Close to Death from Anthony Horowitz. And in December, The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. And so now I have the pleasure, but also the hard task of figuring out which of these things wins against each other. Right now, I'm just going to kind of jot myself a little note, and then I will cut out the covers and paste them in to make this somewhat prettier. You can kind of see the penciled in lines for where things go. So first up, I've got to consider Starling House and Under the Whispering Door. Starling House kind of won in January by default because it was good and I liked it, but it was not necessarily up there for me in the best things I read all year, So it's not a surprise that it's not going to win here. And then Under the Whispering Door has kind of an easy round to make it through because it's up against something that won its category kind of by default. In April and March, we have East of Eden for March and Dungeon Crawler Carl for April. And I said in a previous video about how much I was enjoying reading East of Eden, that it really holds up, that it was, not a snooty man's classic. It's actually genuinely a fun, good read. But come on, it has to be Dungeon Crawler Carl. I enjoyed this series so much. I laughed out loud and people gave me weird looks because I was listening to it in the car while I was driving and apparently sitting at a stoplight laughing. So it has to be Dungeon Crawler Carl. For May and June, we've got How to Solve Your Own Murder pitted against Legends and Lattes, which is just not very fair to How to Solve Your Own Murder because it is without a doubt Legends and Lattes. The vibes from Legends and Lattes, the cozy fantasy RPG world where somebody, this orc stops being a warrior and tries her hand at business and it's found family. It's Legends and Lattes. How to Solve Your Own Murder was fun. It was great, but it's Legends and Lattes. Why are we discussing this? So as we come over for this side, for July and August, July we've got The World We Make against Kate Morton's Homecoming, which I really liked, but also I can't remember the plot quite as well. And to me, that means that it's something that I wasn't as into. I remember the plot. She's in Australia. She has to go back when her grandmother dies. But the fact that it hasn't really stuck with me a super ton since August, whereas The World We Make and that whole duology in general about cities being embodied in people, and specifically the city of New York being embodied in 5 or 6, depends how you count, people to make up the city. It stayed with me. The themes still are resonating with me. I can talk a lot more coherently about The World We Make, and that staying power of it means that it's the winner for me. I specifically didn't go back and refresh my memory on some of these books or refresh my memory on the plots specifically, because that staying power, the lastingness, how much I liked it then versus how much I like it now with a few months of reflection in the meantime, is part of, for me, how I pick which of these books I'm liking the best. And so I specifically didn't refresh my memory on them, and the fact that I remember it so much better than Homecoming means it's The World We Make. If you think I made the wrong choice, like, feel free to tell me all about it in the comments about what I'm not remembering about Homecoming that I should be, for why maybe I let it lose to The World We Make. Ooh, September's Memory Police versus The Weaver and the Witch Queen. Oh dear. So I really loved The Memory Police. It was haunting. It was beautiful. It was weird. Those are some of my favorite adjectives for the books that I read. It was kind of dark, but also somewhat uplifting. And then The Weaver and the Witch Queen, which was sort of Norwegian folklore-esque. And I'm really loving The Weaver and the Witch Queen. But a part of me is wondering if I'm loving it because I love The Witch's Heart so much, which is Genevieve Gornichek's, I think it's her first book. It's definitely the first one I've read from her. But I think it was her first debut ever. I'm wondering if my love for that book is in any way coloring my love of The Weaver and the Witch Queen. And I think that it is. I think it has to be The Memory Police here. As much as I really, police has an E on it. I teach English for a living. I know how to spell things. As much as I really did love The Weaver and the Witch Queen, I think it needs to be The Memory Police. Okay, and so for November and December, we've got Close to Death, which kind of won by default. I only had read 2 books in November, and it was this or The Old Man and the Sea, and I went with this one because. So I guess that also makes the Book of Doors win by default, because the thing that it was pitted against is kind of a weak choice. And this is a weakness of the bracket as a whole. It's a weakness of the bracket as a whole that this book pitted against something else might have been a very difficult choice. Like, this was a difficult choice, but had either of these books been pitted against my November pick or my January pick, or even possibly, because it's a reread, my March pick, East of Eden, had they been pitted against any of those things, they'd have won easily. But Memory Police, not Memory Police, The Weaver and the Witch Queen goes out early, not because it was a weak choice, but because it was against something that was such a strong choice. And that's what I meant at the beginning when I said that in theory, this picks the best book. And it does pick the best book, but it doesn't necessarily pick the books in order. Like, what is a semifinalist isn't necessarily better than something that went out in the first round, just depending on how the brackets work out. And if you want to see something that does pick your actual best books in order, stay tuned, because I will do my head-to-head, which does give you a ranked list. And so we'll talk about that in a future video. But back to this, I'm stalling the hard part, because now I have to figure out, of these 3, Under the Whispering Door, Dungeon Crawler Carl, and Legends and Lattes, which of these 3 things moves on. Oh my gosh. So this is really tough. I did very much like Under the Whispering Door, but not as much as I liked some of TJ Klune's other work, like House on the Cerulean Sea. And I very much enjoyed Under the Whispering Door. I liked seeing the representation of a gay couple that was very natural and not forced. And that's partly because it's an own voices representation from TJ Klune. Dungeon Crawler Carl made me laugh out loud, but that's also partly the whole series that is getting this interesting, why I'm enjoying it so much. Is it just Dungeon Crawler Carl, or is it the whole series? And then Legends and Lattes, which, man, I loved Legends and Lattes. And there is a prequel for this, the name of which I can't come up with right now, that I have not read, but it's been on my list. But I'm worried about reading it because I'm worried that it will flavor Legends and Lattes for me, or that I'll have the same problem about, do I love this book or do I love the whole of what that series is, or what that whatever. So if you've read the other one, can you well, first, remind me of the name in the comments, and two, let me know, like, am I weird about having that thought about it? Should I just read it? What are your thoughts if you've read both of those things? Again, I'm stalling. I don't want to have to pick. It's so hard. I love them all. I love Legends and Lattes most, so it has to be Legends and Lattes, which I'm going to stick in there. It's really faint. I'm not sure you can see it, but there is a box there. I promise. It goes there. And then on the other side, oh no, this side's worse. That side was relatively easy in comparison to this. I've got The World We Make and The Memory Police and The Book of Doors. Okay. Dang, what am I going to do with that? Gut instinct here. Which one would I reread? I would reread right this minute. Dang, I'd reread all of them. Let's be real. If I had a friend sitting here whose taste is like mine and who hadn't read any of these, where would I tell them to start? I'd tell them to start at The Book of Doors, but I fully acknowledge that that may be recency bias. So as we were kind of discussing back here when I was looking at these, how well I remember it is part of my like internal mechanism for how good it was, because I remember it very well if I loved it, but I also remember it very well if I hated it. I tend to be able to catalog all the things I didn't like. But when it's kind of in the middle and not even just mediocre, but not as good as some of the other things I've read, those details start to fade. And so it's possible that I'm thinking about The Book of Doors that way, and it's not faded because I read it in December, which was, a month ago. So it's still pretty fresh in my mind. But also, this is my game, and I get to play it the way I want to play it. And I'm going to go with The Book of Doors, even if it's recency bias. Oh no. That leaves me with Legends and Lattes and The Book of Doors. And who gets to win? Who gets to win? It's got to be Legends and Lattes, which I'm not going to pencil in because only part of this is taken up. And knowing me, I'll pencil it in a place that doesn't get covered by the book cover. It's got to be Legends and Lattes. I loved the vibes. It was so cozy. It came to me in a time in my reading in June when I'm wrapping up the school year. I'm an English teacher in my real life. Came to me in a time in the year when I just needed something fun and good and interesting with all the right vibes, and Legends and Lattes delivered. So that's going to be the book that ends up here as apparently the best book I read in 2024. I will steal my journal away for a minute. Let's not pay attention to how dirty it is. That's how we know it's well loved. I'm going to steal my book away here and bring it back when that spread is complete. Okay, all done. Here we have my finished book bracket of the best reads of 2024, or at least of my favorite reads from 2024, considering the constraint of having to pick one from each month. So I've got it here. I've ended up with a cover of Legends and Lattes and a cute little tiny review there. So I've ended up with Legends and Lattes here in the middle, a little review for it, and a reminder of my favorite things that I read in 2024. Before you go, let me know in the comments if you do a book bracket or if you use some other method to decide your favorite read for the year. Do you try to decide your favorite read for the year, or do you find it, like me, very agonizing and therefore perhaps you avoid it? Thanks for geeking out with me today. Let's hang out together again soon.